everyone, welcome to Coach Hall Writes. Chances are, if you have stumbled across this video, you are interested in how to prepare for AP Lang during your summer break. And that likely means that you are an upcoming AP Lang student. If that's the case, please make sure that you subscribe and turn those notifications on. That way you don't miss any future AP Lang videos. Before I give you some suggestions of what you could do to help you prepare for AP Lang over the course of the summer, I want to remind you of a couple things. First of all, some schools do have a required summer project or summer reading for the AP Lang course. This is very school specific, so please check with your school or your teacher. A lot of times, upcoming AP Lang students will ask me, what can I do to prepare over the summer? And honestly, my answer is typically that you as a student don't really need to do much to prepare. Trust that your teacher is going to meet you at the level that you're at and guide you through the process. That being said, I do understand that some students want to get ahead or just to feel more prepared. And since this is a skills-based class, I do have some suggestions of some different tasks that you could do that are pretty low maintenance but still helpful. The first is reading 2 to 3 nonfiction articles per week. I would pick articles that interest you. Now, the source doesn't really matter, but I would encourage you to make sure that these are credible articles. The reason why this can be a valuable activity is because AP Lang focuses on argument, evidence, and rhetoric, specifically in nonfiction. There's different types of articles out there, so you might be interested in trying some opinion columns, maybe some feature stories. Like I said, choose something from a credible source that interests you. As you read these articles, practice identifying a claim. Also consider the tone. So remember that tone is the author's attitude toward the subject. You also can look at the style and the rhetorical strategies that the writer is using. Also, being familiar with current events can help you with some synthesis or argument prompts. Synthesis and argument are two different types of essays that you will encounter in AP Lang. Now, if you've never had to write either of those types of essays before, don't panic. You'll learn how to do that in the class. And by the way, I have some videos on my channel to help you learn the basics of those essays if you're interested. But for right now, you're in the summer before your AP course, so you don't really need to worry about how to write these particular essays, but it can be helpful if you are familiar with current events because it helps you gather evidence that you could potentially use depending on which prompts you're presented with. And even if you don't ever use these current events in an essay, being familiar with current events and reading articles can help you as you prepare for college. It also helps you be a more informed citizen. The next thing you can do is practice paraphrasing and summarizing. Now, chances are this might be a skill that you already have, so you might just be refining that skill. In AP Lang, we're actually going to be shifting our focus from summarizing more toward analyzing. We're going to want strong commentary, and that is a skill that you will develop in different ways throughout the course. However, being able to paraphrase and summarize are very fundamental skills for essay writing. And these are skills that you might need beyond the AP class because as a writer, you need to be able to restate complex ideas clearly. So after you read an article, let's say, jot down the author's main claim and how they support that claim in your own words. Try to practice doing this concisely. So if you read an article, try to summarize the article in 3 to 5 sentences. Or if you're focusing on a specific part of an article and not the whole article, see if you can paraphrase or summarize what the author said in 1 to 2 sentences. Practicing these skills can be helpful with rhetorical analysis and also synthesis essays later on in the course because there are times when you might need to concisely paraphrase or summarize before you lead into your commentary. And again, if you're not sure what rhetorical analysis or synthesis are, don't worry, you will learn more about that in the class itself. And I've got plenty of videos to help you along. But as far as what practice you could be doing over the summer, we're trying to make sure that you are very comfortable with the basics. That way you're ready for those more advanced skills as your teacher exposes you to them throughout the class. Something else that you can do is you can listen to TED Talks or podcasts. Again, choose topics that are interesting to you. So if you are interested in history, there are some great podcasts out there for that. If you are a student who ultimately wants to be maybe pre-med in college, there are some science-based ones out there that are really interesting. If you are a student athlete who's very interested in sports, there are TED Talks and podcasts about that too. Why is this important? Well, exposure to strong arguments in different formats builds understanding. And like I said before, you could possibly use these topics for an argument essay and maybe for broader context for a synthesis essay or a rhetorical analysis essay. Again, that is super dependent on what you listen to and which prompt you're answering. But as I said before, with reading the articles, the more information you have, the more you're becoming an informed citizen, the more tools you're putting in your toolbox for when you do have to start writing these essays. So as you're listening to the TED Talks or podcasts, listen for claims, listen for their reasoning, maybe a tone shift perhaps. Also, think about the persuasive techniques that they might be using as they're developing their argument. And especially for TED Talks, but also for some podcasts, when you're done listening to it, reflect on what you've listened to and ask yourself, to what extent do I agree with the speaker's claim? This can not only help your critical thinking, but also your analysis skills later on. Also, depending on the college classes that you take, you might take some lecture-based classes where you're going to have to practice those active listening skills. So listening to TED Talks or podcasts can be a way to hone those skills now. And by the way, it's totally okay to read the transcript or listen with closed captioning on if that helps you. As you listen to these podcasts or TED Talks or read these articles, I want you to reflect. AP Lang is all about the how and why of communication. So after you read or watch something, ask yourself, what was the author's purpose? Who was the audience? And what choices did they make and why? These are some core questions of rhetorical analysis. So if you get used to thinking about the purpose and the audience and maybe even those choices now, you're going to be a step ahead as you start your AP Lang class. As you might have gathered, the AP Lang class does involve writing. I like to have my students start out with shorter writing assignments and then we build to essays because good sentences lead to good paragraphs and good paragraphs lead to good essays. I've also found that consistent low stakes writing helps build confidence. On the exam, your essays will be timed. And so if you practice writing a developed paragraph in, let's say, 15 to 25 minutes, that can actually help you prepare for the low stakes pressure of some timed writing that you might end up doing in your AP Lang class. Now you might be wondering, okay, but what do I write? What would the paragraph look like? Honestly, because it's the summer before you're taking the class, just writing in general can be very helpful. So if you're more comfortable with writing a summary, that's a great starting point. But if you're able to shift beyond that, you might try writing a claim and including some evidence and commentary. And if you want to challenge yourself even more, practice using advanced punctuation like colons and dashes correctly. My last tip for you is to keep a vocab log. As a writer, it's important that you use precise and powerful diction. So diction is word choice. We don't want you to just throw in fancy words to your essays and use them haphazardly. We want to make sure that the words you choose convey meaning. Now, the reason why I'm suggesting that you keep a vocab log is because that process is often more organic, and therefore you are more likely to retain the words. I've found that if students try to look up vocab lists and just memorize those words, it doesn't really stick in the long term, and oftentimes students struggle using those words correctly. So instead, what I recommend is that you track unfamiliar or impressive words from your reading. So whether it's one of the articles that you're reading or maybe a word that you hear in a TED Talk or a podcast, write down those words. You can keep a note in your phone. Also, if you're using this summer to prepare for the SAT or the ACT, chances are you might encounter some more advanced vocabulary words in some of those passages. Write those words down as well. I would encourage you to look up not only the definition of the word, but also the part of speech and a couple example sentences. That way you can make sure you're using the word correctly and you understand what it means. Then practice using those words in your own writing. This will help you develop language awareness as opposed to just trying to memorize fancy sounding words. All right, there you have it. Those are some simple things that you can do this summer to help you prepare for some of the skills needed in AP Lang. Now, as I said before, if you're taking AP Lang in the upcoming school year, don't forget to subscribe. That way you don't miss any future AP Lang videos. And by the way, as you're taking the class, if there's ever a topic that you have a question about, chances are I've probably made a video about that topic. So be sure to search my channel. That way I can help you during your AP Lang journey. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy writing!